We begin this hour with President Trump's retribution tour, entering uncharted waters with a stunning indictment of former FBI Director James Comey. Comey was charged Thursday with 2 felony counts, making a false statement and obstruction of a congressional proceeding, just 5 days after Trump publicly pressured his attorney general on social media to prosecute Comey, as well as several other of Trump's perceived enemies, including Senator Adam Schiff and New York Attorney General Letitia James. And now, the New York Times is reporting that the Department of Justice has issued a subpoena for records related to the travel history of Georgia District Attorney Fani Willis, who previously charged Trump in an election interference case, in case you don't remember. The Times says it's unclear whether Willis is the target of the inquiry. But yesterday, Trump signaled to reporters that the pressure campaign is far from over.
Now that James Comey has been indicted, who is the next person on your list in this retribution?
It's not a list, but I think there'll be others. I mean, they're corrupt. There'll be others. Look, that's my opinion.
Not a list. But Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi is not the only one feeling the pressure here. The president is increasingly deputizing his allies to do his bidding. This week, he signed a memorandum that enlists his Homeland Security advisor, Stephen Miller, to oversee an effort to crack down on what the White House calls domestic terrorist networks. But if you really listen, it sounds more like an effort to target protesters and critics of the administration.
What we have seen, if you look at whether it be going back to the riots that started with Black Lives Matter and all the way through to the Antifa riots, the attacks on ICE officers, the doxing campaigns, and now the political assassinations, these are not lone, isolated events. This is part of an organized campaign of radical left terrorism. It is structured, it is sophisticated, it is well-funded, it is well-planned.
Joining us now, George Conway, conservative lawyer and president of the Society for the Rule of Law, and Liz Oyer, former DOJ pardon attorney who was fired by Trump's Justice Department in March after she opposed the restoration of gun ownership rights to actor Mel Gibson. Also joining us, Michael Feinberg, former assistant special agent in charge with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who also resigned earlier this year after he says he was threatened with a demotion because of his friendship with Peter Strzok, a longtime Trump target. Michael, actually, I want to start with you here mentioning Peter Strzok. I mean, who is next on the list on Trump's retribution tour?
There are very much a couple of obvious candidates, like the individuals you mentioned, Fani Willis, John Brennan, but we also know from some of his Truth Social postings that he plans to go after, for example, Adam Schiff and some of his competitors and rivals in the Democratic legislature. But I think it's important to note that however many names we currently know of, the list is going to grow and it's never going to end as long as people push back on White House priorities. And this is something people need to realize. This revenge tour is never going to be completed. As long as there is any organized opposition, individuals are going to keep getting added to the list of people that the federal government will be weaponized to target.
Can we just take a second and realize how absolutely insane it is to even be talking about a list? The idea that the president of the United States has groups of people that he is willing to use the entire federal government against, right? Because we're not just talking about the DOJ. Now that Stephen Miller has whatever job he has, and he's going to start going after these different groups of Democrats, right? It is actually insane that that's where we are. Had to say that. But sometimes driving me insane. But one of the things that is undergirding all of this is Trump using his personal attorneys, because he knows their loyalty, as the tip of the spear. Lindsay Halligan, we've talked about her, who has never prosecuted anything. But I want to hear some of the headlines about her. 36-year-old Miss Colorado hopeful who only worked 3 federal cases before Trump promoted her to U.S. attorney. Everyone's saying no. Trump hires Florida insurance lawyer as top attorneys refuse to work for him. This is in August of 2022. This Florida insurance lawyer is helping Trump vet the art at the Smithsonian. That was earlier this year. So her jobs have been kind of all over the place. What does it say to you, Liz, that Lindsay Halligan has this role and this is what we're seeing? And she's the one who finally did what Donald Trump wanted and indicted James Comey.
Yeah, Lindsay Halligan is a sham prosecutor. She has no relevant experience. She has no knowledge of what she's doing. She apparently had to be tutored in how to present a case to the grand jury so that she could do so to get this indictment against James Comey. She had to do that because nobody else in the entire Eastern District of Virginia U.S. Attorney's Office, which has hundreds of employees, was willing to go into that grand jury and present that evidence. Donald Trump looks for one thing in people who he puts in high-level positions, and that is loyalty to Donald Trump. And that is really not the quality that U.S. attorneys are supposed to have. They take an oath to uphold the Constitution. They are there to serve the people of the United States.
They're their lawyers. They're the people's lawyers, not the White House's lawyers.
Exactly. They work for us, the people, the citizens, the taxpayers. They don't work for Donald Trump, the man. But that is not how he sees it, and that is not how they see their roles. Pam Bondi made it clear on day one in her role as Attorney General that the entire workforce of the Justice Department, which includes about 115,000 people, works for Donald Trump as his personal law firm, and that is what is enabling him to go on this revenge tour.
In the words of Liz, a sham attorney, in the words of Eugene, insane. George, when you look at the politics of this, I want to pull up this YouGov poll that asks whether it's acceptable for a president to direct the Justice Department to investigate political opponents. Now, 54% of adults, all adults, say that it's unacceptable. 21% say that it's acceptable. But when you look at Republicans, only 30% say that it's unacceptable. 38% believe that it's acceptable. What changes that?
The election of a Democratic president? I don't know. I mean, it's just, it really is just absurd to think that people think that the government of the United States, which they pay for, that they vote for, is really in service of one man. We're supposed to have government of the people, by the people, for the people. We have government of Trump, by Trump, and for Trump. He is using every arm of the federal government to create, pleasure for himself in terms of adulation, getting airplanes and such, and also to seek vengeance upon his enemies. And it's not just, it's particularly profound in the context of the Justice Department, where people can go to jail if they are convicted of crimes that the Justice Department charges them of. But it's like, he's doing it with every piece of the federal government. And immigration, the Defense Department, everything. I mean, this is so anti-democratic, so anti-constitutional. I think more people are starting to take notice, but the Republicans, those Republican poll numbers just show that so many Republicans are just, they want this. They want Trump to run a government for himself because for some reason it gratifies them to see him go after people they perceive to be their enemies because they're Trump's enemies.
Well, and George, we were just talking about this. I think it's really important for all of us to take a step back and look at how we got here. Trump is trying to avenge his the people that he thinks caused the majority of his legal problems rooting from 2016, the investigation into his campaign's ties with Russia. That was technically a Trump DOJ that investigated him for those Russia ties.
Not technically, it definitely was. It was under his administration.
It's so long ago now. Yeah. It's really hard to process that. But ever since, there were enough people who were sort of the safeguards in place who prevented him from going off the deep end, from outright canceling investigations and snuffing them aside. When you look at where we are now, however many years later, I mean, Liz, what do you think is the single most damaging thing that Trump has done to get us to a point now where it's unfathomable to even think that a Trump Justice Department would ever investigate him and investigate something like the Russia investigation and what happened in 2016?
Yeah, the most damaging thing that Trump has done is the systematic dismantling of safeguards inside the Justice Department. That has included firing career experts who could stand in the way of his political agenda. He fired the ethics chief, the professional responsibility chief, the person who oversees transparency so that the public knows what's going on in the department. And he has at the same time loaded the department up with people who are blindly loyal to him, people who served as his personal attorneys in the past and are continuing to treat their official powers in that way. And his approach to the administration of justice, it is fundamentally un-American. You get prosecuted if you don't agree with Donald Trump. You get special treatment if you support Donald Trump or you boost his message. And that is fundamentally at odds with the equal justice under law that we've always been striving to achieve in this country.